tonight we are going to make our way through some more warrant articles. I am under the impression that I am supposed to produce a document for the town meeting book, which consists primarily of subcommittee reports, of which I've gotten one so far. So, and I will be in Utah the week of starting April 19th. So I need to get subcommittee reports.
We just emailed them to you?
That would be great, but I really need them. What's the deadline for your deadline?
Well, I wanted to have them by end of day on Friday if possible.
Like this Friday?
Yeah, but
It's not gonna happen.
Monday, I could do Monday.
You could do Monday.
Yep.
Thanks for messing my weekend up, but.
Do you want me to send out a request?
Yeah.
People to.
Yeah, did you send something out tomorrow morning? So we really, if he needs them Monday, I need them, so I can work on
Yeah.
it. And the only one I've gotten is from Jim. And
Mine's.
That's why I got figured with the meeting.
Do you want us to just send them straight to Jeff, or do you want to see them first?
I think I'm supposed to look at
Yeah,
them
you're-
first. Yeah.
Okay.
So I need them electronically too. So Jim, if you could have someone send it to me electronically,
What's your email address?
we can
I
do
can
that.
send that out.
You can send it to Barbara, she can send it over.
Oh, all right.
Linda's done too.
Liz?
In terms of formatting, I took a look at the Public Works, Police, and Fire, and format that was passed out earlier this spring. And I am making it look exactly like that. I could send out a little style sheet to everyone tonight if people want to use that format.
That would be great. And this is obviously assuming that that format is fine. I probably will be.
Or you can send the whole thing to me and I'll reformat it, make it all look the same.
Well, in terms of
When you're ready.
margins and stuff like that, but I just need it for content.
Okay.
That would be great. If you could do that, that would be fantastic. But I have to give them to Jeff on Monday. I obviously need to get it.
Barbara, did I give you a copy of that?
Is that different from the one that we talked about?
Subcommittee.
I got it in the mail from you, Jim. so-
Yeah, I know, I know the secretary said there's a problem with your email address.
All right, so enough of that. Diane, you're first up on our agenda to talk primarily about position classification and compensation plan, which is Article 9 of the warrant.
Basically, this is a kind of a standard article that we do every year. The town has and I brought copies if you didn't have them with you. As most of you know, the town has an outside consultant that it hired, 5 or 6 years ago. And they came in and they studied positions, wrote job descriptions, rated them by a point factor system, and set up a hierarchy of positions. That's the classification part of the plan. And it's set up in such a way that it would be non-discriminatory and defensible in court, which is what most communities do and what you need. So if somebody was hired into a position, they couldn't say it was rated a particular way because of their ethnic background or their sex or their age and so forth. And so, again, this proprietary system that's owned by this company, and they would defend the town. So we maintain the plan. And the second part of the plan, of course, is the compensation part. So you have a hierarchy of positions, and then you take usually what they call benchmark positions that are familiar in similar organizations. So for example, mostly everybody has a DPW director in this part of the state, and so forth. And you take those typical positions, and you would then, this company did at that time, give the town a set of what they thought the ranges should be and so forth. And then we've kept up with those through general wage increases and moving the ranges and so forth. So this is something that just gets updated every year. And this year, there've only been 4 changes made to the classification part of the plan since last year's town meeting. or I should say, I try to do this from January to January because of the town reports and things, this usually gets published. So, from the last calendar year, there were an upgrade of 3 positions, and then one's just, a clerical type of, change to the plan where we added administrative secretary grade 5 to the non-union group. For some reason, it wasn't in there before. It was in the union groups, which we do have those positions unionized, but we must have one that wasn't, and a department head must have pointed it out to me. So that's basically the change in the plans, except for what I show you on what was given this year as a movement in the ranges, which was 5%. And of course, that had to do a lot with the fact that we bargained with all our unions very hard. We did, I think, a very good job, in addition to the school committee, getting most of the unions settled in 6 to 7 months, and bought back changes in the health insurance, which we're all very pleased to see. With self-funding has allowed us to only increase our insurance rates by 3.5% this year as of July 1, when the average out there is about 7%. So that's the background information on this year's plan changes.
What were the upgraded positions?
Be happy to tell you. Last year, I know the warrant committee members, I think it was Mr. Hoffman, brought up my position in the town accountants. We were being paid outside the range, and the selectmen directed us to have those finally reviewed by the consultant and regraded, because we were given additional job duties after the last town administrator left. And then when Tom came on board and worked with the selectmen, they decided to make those changes permanent. So town accountant and my position went from grade 18 to grade 20. And the upgrade of the community development director from 20 to 22, because his assistant's position was eliminated and he took on all those duties. And then the one clerical, admin change was, as I said, to put an administrative secretary slot into the non-union positions. It's always been there, it just wasn't listed there before.
So these 3 positions were upgraded
Yes.
from, they were a lower classification prior, and then they moved. And did that also result in a more than 3 or 4% increase in salary for the people holding those jobs? In other words, if, I would assume the upgrade, the range that you were upgraded to also included part of the range that one was upgraded from.
Yes. I don't have those exact amounts with me. I know that the result of the upgrade didn't give Barbara or I any additional money. That had already been worked through. And then I forget what the upgrade for Glenn was, to be honest.
The upgrade in the CD position actually, as a total cash, I believe actually was less for the department, because we didn't fund that second position. Glenn took some duties, and we had a part-time non-benefit, I believe, 15 or 16-hour position take over the conservation functions. So it was actually a net loss as far as
Net savings.
net savings. Okay.
Please.
Sorry, net savings.
Angela, do you have something?
Yeah. Who determines the ranges? I mean, do we go out and do a comparative study with other communities, or do we just look at what we're paying people and saying, okay, these are the ranges we have to have in order for our people to fit within the range? Or do we go out and say, fire chiefs in the 15 surrounding communities make between this number and this number?
What I can tell you is the consultant has not done that, because we haven't hired them back to do it. But I participate in salary surveys all the time, and I get the books from the Mass Municipal Personnel Association
Right.
on what our like communities are doing, and I periodically check those. I save all the electronic surveys I participate in and get the results back, and it looks like we're on the mark for the benchmark positions that I pay attention to, like the ones you mentioned.
Okay, so if we went out and there's very few communities that would have a police chief that has a higher range of greater than 109. Is that
That
safe to
would be
say?
I
Or
would
a
say-
minimum range of less than 78?
I would say that would be safe to say, yeah. Yes. You might get more paid in Boston, for example, but I try to stay with comparables.
No, that's a different ballgame.
Yeah, like
entirely.
Lexington
About
and
a
so
comparable.
forth. Concord, yeah,
Yeah.
Wellesley and so forth, yes.
So just so I understand what's changed from last year to this year, the minimum, mid, and max are the same as last year?
No. The
No,
ranges
not
moved
5%
They all went up 5%?
Everything. Yes, the whole playing field just moved.
Okay, and that was based on your we didn't hire a consultant, that was based on our own internal judgment.
And that was based on the fact that we settled with all the unions at a 5% increase. And we were trying to keep the internal pay structures the same as they were before. And because, and as I mentioned, we did that, we gave approximately an extra 2% because of take-backs or give-backs in the health insurance. And so that you wanted to keep your ranges from moving in the same vein to keep the plan the way it was originally set up.
Could you clarify for me, is the personnel policy of Belmont to hire new people at the mid-range and then keep them at the mid-range, trending up over their careers, or so that nobody is at the min and nobody is at the max, or is it something different than that?
It depends on the hiring. We have a wide latitude of management discretion there. For example, if we were to hire somebody in, I'm going to say the assistant town clerk's position, just because it's vacant and it's a 13, it's the first one I happen to look at. But let's say you hired somebody who had the very minimum qualifications and experience that was required. So they were fairly new out of school and so forth. You're going to hire them at the minimum or a little above. And the way plans are set up is that you try to get somebody to the midpoint of the salary, which is the market rate area, within 5 years of experience if they're doing a good job. You would hire somebody at the midpoint or above if you hired a really seasoned professional that you needed to compete in the market and, entice them with salary and benefits and so forth. I don't know if that answered the question.
So the year one wage is a market wage, so a junior person is low, a senior person is high, and then thereafter they trend to some.
Yeah, and you can move back and forth from the midpoint to the max depending on your rating, because that's all performance-based raises once you get to that point in our system. All right, so we give what's called step equivalents. Unions, of course, get steps to the max. The max is their market rate. We give step equivalents based on performance reviews and a general wage increase to get people moving in the range. Otherwise, the ranges would move and they would not keep trending toward the midpoint of the salary, the market rate, they wouldn't stay. Once you get to the midpoint of the salary, then it's all, no step equivalencies, all performance-based raises. So you can move back and forth depending on how you're doing.
So, if I may question. So the assumption is that any employee that's been here is going to have to be at least at the mid-range. So if somebody is underperforming, he can still move into the mid-range of the job.
Well,
because he's below the mid-range.
Well, they can also fall back. In other words, if they don't do a good job, get a poor review, they would get the step equivalency. And I have actually.
That's my question.
Yeah,
So if somebody is a marginal employee below the mid-range, he doesn't automatically get movement toward the mid-range.
No.
Liz?
Wait, I think that was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see you, Tom.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just to Roy's question, because he may have not asked this, but for union positions, police, fire, DPW, generally, and I'll say maybe 99 out of 100 times, when someone new comes on, at least for general government, they go to step 1 on the union range, and then they move up, depending upon the union, to 5, 6, 7 steps. The only time that they generally possibly may go above step 1, I'll give you a case of police and fire. If you have a transfer of experience coming from another community, they may go over step 1, but for police, fire, DPW, SEIU, most of those start at step 1 and then work their way up.
Two questions. Just, the first is what happens if someone is promoted from, say, library assistant, administrative assistant 1 to administrative assistant 2? And they were at the max of the range for administrative assistant 1. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's part of the town's employee handbook, which I believe years ago was approved at town meeting, so I consider it like bylaw, is that it states in there that if you get promoted, for every grade that you increase, you go back one step. Which is classic pay kind of design.
That's a collectively bargained thing, isn't it, or is it?
Well, the unions accepted that as part of their practice, so they follow that handbook provision.
Okay. Mike?
I pick up on Angela's question, make sure I understand it. If you're below the mid, let's say you earn through performance a 3% increase, do you get another increase in addition to the 3% because you're below the mid?
Yes, if you're below, if your minimum to midpoint, and this is the non-union people only.
Right, that's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
so if you're in that range.
Yes.
Developmental range, they call it.
Yeah.
You get the general wage increase, because you could have somebody at the very minimum, when you move the ranges, they fall below the range.
Right.
So they move with the range. And then they get what we call a step equivalency based on performance that they're eligible to get if they qualify for it.
So you could get an increase and not have it, you would get an increase even if you're a poor performer on the basis of the first, not the second.
Yes, you could.
Well, that was my question, and I was
Usually
led
if
to
you're
believe that
that-
that was not the answer.
I know, that's why I'm.
Oh,
Thank
I
you for
apologize.
clearing it up, huh? Yeah, why would we do that?
It's just done everywhere that I've dealt with before to keep people from, because what it's really based on is keeping people even in the range. They're not moving up toward the market rate because they have a poor review, and frankly, if their reviews are that bad the next year, they're not gonna be around to worry about it. They won't be there to get the general wage increase, you see?
Yeah,
I've
I think
never
in
seen
practice,
it-
that doesn't work, but it's my
Well,
concern.
let me just say, I've never seen anyone get the continually going on in a non-union position, getting general wage increases without some kind of a merit, or they're gone. They just don't make it in the system.
I don't think that's been our experience in town. That's what I'm
I
suggesting.
don't know of anybody it's happened to since I've been here.
We can talk about it afterward.
Okay?
Right, well, we're definitely saying that, or what I'm hearing is that if you're a poor performer, you will be
You should not be
out
getting.
of the system.
You should be out of the system.
Right.
And
Right.
either out of the system because you choose to go out because you're no longer competitively paid, or out of the system because you're forced out because you're not performing.
Right.
But, you know, to have a policy whereby you're giving increases to poor performers only because the salary range moves is something I really struggle with. And I think we've had a little bit of this conversation, and I'm not sure how to correct it. I understand what the constraints are, but it's something that I'm troubled with.
Yeah. And of course, it's illegal to pay people below the minimum of the range.
Really?
Under the Equal Pay Act. You can't do that.
But you can keep them at the minimum. There's nothing that says they have to be earning a penny more
Well,
than
to
the
keep them
minimum.
at the minimum, I agree. And to keep them at the minimum, and when the range moves, if they're at the minimum, you have to move them back into the range.
Well, the other thing that I struggle with is I don't necessarily buy the logic, and I understand how we did it this time, and it's something for us to think about in future years. Buy the logic that the range has to move by the amount of the salary. Right? There's nothing that says if everybody get a 5% raise, that the ranges all have to move 5%. The ranges could move 2.5%, people would be at a different place in the range, even though they got more. Because what that does is it tends to inflate the ranges over time.
Yeah, this conversation strikes me as an important one
It's
to
a very
have,
important one,
but
but it's-
I'm not really sure that we're the right forum 2 weeks before town meeting
No.
to be debating it. And it's, but when was the last time that this whole scheme was looked at by consultants, outside consultants?
About 6 years ago.
6 years ago, okay. So, Angela, this strikes me as being an important selectman, town administrator kind of dialogue, which the warrant committee can contribute to, but sort of taking a fresh look at the entire compensation scheme and the assumptions that go into changing it would be worthwhile. We have a more narrow task, which is to decide what we're gonna do on Article 9 for town meeting. Does anybody also have any thoughts about that sort of general topic? I don't see that we're gonna accomplish any meaningful change to the entire compensation system tonight, or next week, or the week after. But it, surely it could be something that the selectmen.
Could I ask,
wanna look
let me
at.
ask the question this way. What would be the impact if we suggested to Human Resources, instead of moving the range 5%, we move the range 3.5%?
You're definitely gonna have some people probably go outside the top of the range that have been here a long time.
Well, but okay.
It also causes what I would refer to, and again, I've been to some compensation classes, but, you know, you'd have to have the town consultant come in, is then you get into wage compression issues and that type of thing, with bottom ranges moving more than the ranges for the few top people.
Not if you moved them all the same percentage.
Well, you have to move the union ranges by 5% this year, because that's what the raise was. That's the rule that we usually follow since I've been here. The unions settle at 3%, we move the top ranges by 3% also. So the plan design doesn't change.
I think that the salaries are already set. This only reflects what has happened, is that correct?
Only on the
Yes.
unions.
Well, the salaries are set, and basically, my impression would be are immovable on the union side. There's obviously the management, the non-unionized side of the town payroll is not subject to the identical restrictions as the union side, so you have a little more flexibility
Are we
there.
proposing to change the entire budget?
I'm not proposing to
Okay,
change
all
anything right now.
I think this, as last year, I think this issue was somewhat moot because the salary actions have already been taken.
Right.
And
But that's independent of the range.
No, but I
No,
know.
it's not.
You can change salaries, you don't have to change your range in order to correspond to the salary change.
you, as I think was already pointed out by Diana, it would seem inappropriate to have people who are outside the range, and that could logically be the consequence of something you're doing if you're moving the range down and the salary is higher than the range that you're on.
And I guess my rebuttal to that, if I might,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
okay.
is that, you know, we have, it doesn't seem, it seems the tail is wagging the dog here. We're manipulating the range to fit the salaries we pay, as opposed to, you know, figuring out what salaries we pay compared to what range they should be in. And that's what I'm struggling with.
What we don't have right now is very many facts.
Yeah, well, that's,
And that's why I'm suggesting that this is a topic that the selectmen could be well advised to take up with the town administrator, the human resources director, and anybody else who's interested in thinking about it. Frankly, we had do we have a person, what do they call it? A personnel committee?
we do no longer have a personnel board.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a personnel advisory board. They met last night and went over this, and we're fine with it.
Okay, but Angelo's saying that maybe.
We do have a
should look at it
personnel
more
board that's
carefully.
active in meeting?
They met last night.
You probably appointed them, Angelo. Jim?
Another
Committee
reason
keep
I
track.
see for not acting on this now, just before town meeting, is that I'm in doubt as to whether or not the handbook is a contract. If it is, it raises all kinds of other questions. There are cases I'm not a labor lawyer, but I know that Phil is, but I know there are cases where handbooks have been held to be contracts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Diane was pointing to the Equal Pay Act, actually,
Yeah.
as the basis for saying we couldn't leave someone below the minimum. And as Angela was suggesting, might be appropriate in certain poor performers. And the entire range progresses beyond that person's salary. Diane's point was that might be a violation of the Equal Pay Act. I actually don't know whether it would or wouldn't, but anyway, back to the point here. If there's going to be a fresh look taken at the classification and compensation plan, tonight's not the time to do it. Liz?
My recollection is that this is never a popular article because town meeting members say, why on earth are you asking us to approve this? You've already done it. Is the comment most frequently heard. So we might try to craft something we might usefully do this evening is try to craft a better answer to that question, which will probably arise again this year.
Well, you know, Liz, it's the same question we asked.
Yes. No, I'm.
So we're sort of in agreement with town meeting about that one.
Yes, yes, but since we have Diane, maybe we can work up a better answer.
Anybody got any suggestions?
If we're going to act on it, I think we need to act on it proactively. We need to get on top of the position classification and compensation plan that's going to take effect July 1st, 2008, which is what's coming up. Not the one that was enacted last July, which is what this is.
Well, this is, I think, maybe, hopefully a typo. Diane, the document says, position classification and compensation plan, July 1, 2007. Yet, what you're saying is that this is, or maybe it is what went into effect July 1, 2007.
It is.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in fact, we really are ratifying something that took place
Right.
a long time ago.
Yes.
Do we have any idea what's
Why are
going to
we
happen
doing
on
this?
July 1, 08?
Yes, because we have the union contracts all settled.
What about?
So what is-
And since I've gotten here, this is the way, this is not something I've started. Since for years and years in this town, they have presented the plans at town meeting that took effect the July
The
1st
year
before.
before.
And it's based on the fact that they don't, a decision isn't usually made on the merit pay pool until we see kind of what the economy's like, but we also know what the union contracts are. And they're funded in the budgets, and these contracts have just been settled for the next 2 fiscal years. So I know what will be down there, now for July, for the union people anyway, but that's all I know.
What is, but
Go ahead.
what is the period for this classification? I'm now confused. Is it from July 1st of '07
Yes,
through to July 1st of '08?
yes.
Then why did we include the 5% increases in
Because
that? Because
you're
they
not
were
voting
not.
raises here, you're voting the classification and then the pay ranges only.
When
And
did those raises take effect?
The
Seems-
board, the board voted the merit pay pool, I think, in September, and the raises were granted based on performance reviews, retroactive to July.
That's true. But the difference is this year,
But those were,
those were retro back to July 1st because you didn't vote on the merit until the fall. I do have, for the upcoming fiscal year, I have the merit pool on our agenda for May. So we can do that before July 1st starts. The
There-
board has
there-
always had a tendency to do it after July
Afterwards.
1st.
Okay, in event, we talk about, this comes up as, every year, and there's something really unsatisfactory about asking the warrant committee to express an opinion about something that went into effect on July 1st of 2007, and we have no idea what's gonna happen in 2008. And we're coming to the town with a budget that starts on July 1 of '08 and goes till June 30th of '09. And
we
so
don't have a classification plan for that period.
the one will be put in effect, and then we will vote on it retroactively. And so, I mean, it's an intriguing question, and this is no knock on you, Diane. It's just it's strange from a structural standpoint. What would happen if we said we want to just throw the whole thing out? We ask this question every year, don't we, Mike? And, gosh, I have no idea what the answer would be. Tom?
You'd have to-
I mean, why do we do it this way?
It's in your bylaw.
What?
It's in the town's bylaws.
What is in the bylaw?
That you have to vote a classification plan. It's in your bylaw.
In retroactive?
Retroactive?
No, but it says you have to buy a law. The retroactivity, as Diane said,
I mean, that's the issue we're struggling with. not the-
Yeah.
And I don't know why, it's been like that for years before I got here, so I can't tell
Well,
you.
It strikes me that if we're looking at an FY08 budget, the thing we'd like to be looking at, or an FY09 budget, the thing we'd like to be seeing at this point is an FY09
Yeah.
classification
Right.
plan.
Exactly.
No kidding.
Which
Exactly.
I think one could
Exists.
produce
Yeah.
at this point, because if it's all based on union raises, and we already know what they are, we could apply that number to the management schedule, and then we could say yea or nay.
Yeah, what you wouldn't see in advance, of course, is any descriptions that got reclassified for whatever reasons.
Right.
But they should be
And
done.
they're classified by the consultant anyway, which we don't really want to, where it's a proprietary point factor system that we fool around with anyway.
Mike,
That's the question.
I just hate this article.
Yeah, me
It
too.
doesn't make any sense. It's
It makes no
nonsensical.
sense. Why?
Let me ask just a technical question here. I agree, it doesn't make any sense, but you mentioned, Diane, the adjustment tied to the union raise, but then you also mentioned the performance pool or whatever. The thing in May, what's it called?
Well, technically, if you're above the mid-range, there is what the selectmen would say would be a range for your salary increase for non-union employees who are above the mid-range. And that is based your merit pool, because they don't get that 4% step.
No, I understand. I guess the question, let me ask it this way, in terms of producing an updated fiscal '09 plan, do we need any piece of information other than the union contract? I thought you said we didn't, and then I heard you say we
Well,
did, so I'm...
Historically, what the town has always done, and the answer could be yes, is whatever the union contract ranges moved, we moved the management salary ranges. It's moving the playing field. That didn't necessarily translate to raises. It's just keeping the playing fields moving.
I understand.
So if that were to continue as a practice, yes, I could do it.
So we could do that before town meeting? Because
Yes.
we know the union raises this year, so we could produce an updated plan before town, right? You do it tomorrow, just multiply everything by 5%, right?
Well, next year it'll be 3.5 is
Or
what.
3.5,
the town's got.
whatever.
Yeah.
3.5, sorry.
Yes, I could.
Could you do that?
Yes, I can.
Well, that at least gets us the
Yeah.
right dates.
Prospective.
At least it's prospective, that's right. I think that's a plus.
That's a plus. I guess I think that Angelo's
Yeah.
idea, I'll give you credit for it, Angelo, of taking a sort of more careful look at why we do what we do is very good. And, I don't necessarily agree, Diane, that, again, no knock on you personally, you just have to, because you're the HR director, you gotta hear this.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree that because the parking clerk two's pay goes up by 3.5% as a result of a negotiated contract with whatever union represents that person, that means that the fire chief's pay has to go up 3.5%. Maybe there's a good argument for the fire chief going up 5%.
Well-
Or that pay grade. I mean,
But-
I don't see them
I'm just-
necessarily moving in lockstep.
Well, I'm just pointing out that it's not, doesn't mean the fire chief's pay would go up that much.
Well, I guess I meant the
It means
range.
the range
Even the
is
range.
moving.
Even the range, I just
Even
don't
the
see them
range.
necessarily.
And the range is moving because that's how I didn't do it, but how the compensation plan was structured by the consultant. And as I said, I've taken a few classes at Bentley on this type of thing, and that's just classically how it's done. You move your ranges together.
I think
But-
it's time for us to take a fresh look at the entire,
And I would have no problem
Okay,
having
how
my
we do
consultant
that.
back if that's what the
I
town
hear
would
what you're
want.
saying, I don't get the connection between the one and the other. Why they necessarily move in tandem.
Because there's probably some kind of theory in comp plans that when you're moving something for a general wage increase, it's going with the economy of that region, and that the playing field should be moved accordingly for the group of jobs, so.
that should be tested through the surveys. I mean, we know, this is gonna come up when we're hiring the new superintendent, okay? And I know it doesn't apply here, but whenever we go out to hire a new person, we just went out and hired a new police chief, okay? Well, a year ago now, all right? But, or the electric light manager or whatever, all right? And we've got these arbitrary ranges that we're working with. And as Phil said, I'm not sure whether they're too high or too low or what they are. I mean, the feedback we get is that they're too low. Maybe they need to be adjusted because that's what other communities are paying for those positions.
Well, I would agree that, these were structured, as I said, 6 years ago, based on data. We've tried to keep them up to date by using whatever the general wage increase was. And it's probably a good idea every 5 or 6 years to set aside money and have a consultant back to do those charts and make a recommendation.
And also, I think to convene a committee such as, we did with health insurance, where you've got people who, there's gotta be tons of people in the community who have significant expertise in this area.
I would be very supportive of that approach. I would be very supportive of that approach. Just get it out of the politics of the discussion and bring somebody in to sit down and review it and talk about it, because it's just something that the whole way that we do the merit increases, the way that, the way the wages are established, we've talked about this at some length. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and it means that, if I carry it to the extreme, All right, Tom is negotiating with the unions, or you're negotiating with the unions for salary increases, knowing that, boy, if the union's got a really good one, then my salary's gonna go up by an appropriate amount as well, because my ranges are gonna go up by the appropriate amount as well. I mean,
That's why we have just performance review raises as once you hit the midpoint, and why the non-union ranges, even for like people in my staff, in the HR department and clerical positions, have this extra portion of the range above the midpoint, what the unions don't have. It's because you have flexibility in what's granted in the merit pay pool and what can be given
I
for
think
raises.
one of the things that we've got to look at, Tom, set as an objective is a review of this whole thing.
Are we talking review just of general government?
Okay, we're talking a warrant committee meeting right now, so you guys can talk about that later. But for the moment, what I understand is that, Diane, you're gonna have a classification compensation plan that starts on July 1 of '08. So at least we don't have to spend 10 minutes of time meeting explaining why this starts a year ago.
Okay.
And then, can you present it next week, or should
I'm
Tom
away
or Jeff
next
do it?
week, so.
Tom, can you?
We can get the information from Doug.
Because I really want to vote this next week if we possibly can.
I'll just take this and I'll
We've
increase
sort
it.
of had most of the discussion tonight.
Yeah,
And Tom, you'll be prepared to, or Jeff, one of you guys will talk about it next week.
okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure I understand what it is you're proposing. Are you proposing to have town meeting vote to approve two separate installments of the plan, one for FY08 and one for FY09?
I was proposing to have them approve one that covers July 1, '08 to June 30th of '09.
Don't they have to?
So you will have never approved the one that runs from July 1, '07 to July 1?
Under that
I don't think
scheme,
you
I
need
wouldn't
to.
have.
You don't need
I
to.
think the way it's written, it says that we'll from time to time bring the
Okay.
plan to town meetings. So you don't even really have to do it every year, but so you could definitely just bring the updated one.
Let's not do it
yes.
at all then. Why are we bringing it to town meeting?
If the bylaw says from time to time,
Yeah.
well, why don't we
I
follow
don't
through on
know,
this
it's a
idea?
practice. It's a
Just
practice,
dismiss
I
it.
have no idea.
Let's follow through on this idea.
So we'll get more problem on that.
Yeah, we're gonna hear from, there'll be a whole line of 20 people standing in line to ask us why we're dismissing
Why,
that. It's
yeah.
gonna be
Yeah.
surely some shenanigans there,
Yeah.
Angela.
Yeah.
So,
Save the invite.
you'll produce the revised chart for that,
Yes,
and we'll go from there.
okay.
All right, everybody on board with that plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May I ask a procedural question?
Yes, Mike, go ahead.
When this article is presented, will we, two-part question, will we have the updated one that we can pass out to?
Well, we're gonna have that supposedly next week.
No, I mean for the town meeting, I'm sorry.
You want copies for town
Copies for
meetings?
town meeting members, I
Oh, yeah.
think we should.
There should, sure.
And it'll have been posted, the updated one will be posted on the website as soon as we've had our discussion of it, so.
Sure.
Because if it's not, we'll hear from people about that.
Right.
Right, exactly. And Diane then can, or Tom, whoever, but I presume Diane would be the one who would give a brief overview, as you did earlier, of the retrospective one, but of what this is for town meeting,
Again, yeah.
or, is that?
In fact, we'll have it up on, for town meeting, we'll have it up on the PowerPoint.
Right, but I think
Oh, no.
especially now that we're in stronger position.
Right.
Oh, no, she, yeah, we'll
To
give a
have Diane explain
presentation.
what you did tonight, I mean, what this
Right.
is.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
Yeah.
Right, it's not my responsibility, I think, to present the
Right.
position.
I was trying to.
Thank you for rescuing me from that. Liz?
Yeah, and just if that is, I think that's an excellent way to have it presented, and my suggestion would be that somewhere in your notes you have estimates of the number of people in each classification. I bet you that's, the schedule almost invites that question. So if you're gonna be presenting,
That
You're not
question's
saying
actually
he has
never
to-
come up that I
It
can
hasn't.
remember. It's never come up at town
All right.
meeting. no.
Well,
that's fine.
it makes very little sense with the unionized people, it seems to me.
Right, in the management side, for most of these, the answer is one.
Is one, yeah, no, I,
Well, and the other thing too is, I was
Or
just gonna
zero.
say that, this whole top, it's one in each position, but you have to make sure that town meeting understands that it's voting on the pay and classification plan, not individuals' pays. I've seen
sure that-
in other towns it degenerate into a bad situation where somebody is kind of brought up, and it becomes a personalized thing over one or two people, and the vote is over this chart
So
positions.
that's a good point.
Well, excellent.
I'm sure Tom will make that clear.
Well,
Angela?
Just one
Sorry,
fun,
and then you.
as you jump ahead, it doesn't necessarily mean, because it's gonna, somebody may sit down and do the calculation, that if we're moving this 5%, you have to move it another 3.5% to get to the FY '09 range.
That's
Okay,
what
you may want to review how much you need to move the whole range in order to be able to have everybody within the range.
So you're just talking about the non-union people, because the union contracts will move by what
The
the
union
raises.
contracts are the union contracts, those are separate. I'm talking about these ranges.
Are you suggesting should we have, a change in policy at this moment?
Well, I'm suggesting she look at it and see what the impact of that range movement is. I mean, she could, for example, just call this the FY '09 range, okay?
Yeah, but then we're changing our, I think this invites, I agree with all the discussion about a need for a review. I don't think we should do this right now unilaterally, just never do that.
Angela, I agree with that. I think, let's adhere to the current policy, Diane. Produce a document that reflects reality for FY '09, and then explain the 3 upgraded positions, and then we'll, if the selectmen wish to appoint a committee, they will, to look at this whole thing more carefully. Jim? Okay. All right, enough air vented on position classification. Diane, thank you very much, I think.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Very helpful, Diane.
Thank you.
So,
Have a good night.
thank you. Ralph, what I'd like to do is to be able to vote Articles 16 and 17. And you gave a brief presentation last week about these 2 things. And I guess there's 2 questions. One, do we need any more information to vote on them in your view? If so, give it to us. See if anybody has any more questions.
I don't think so. I mean, Article 16 is for the MWRA sewer stormwater infiltration for a loan program. We're getting some money from the state, or from the MWRA. Some of it's in grant, some of it's a loan. The part that's a loan is at 0%, which I think is a very good deal. And the work that's being done is increased modeling and GIS work to see what and where we have the biggest sources of inflow and infiltration problems. And I've already seen the results of the first year of that, and it's giving us a lot of information that's very valuable.
So what's your recommendation?
Yes.
move we recommend approval of Article 16.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Not unanimous. Article 17.
17 is, we sent in an application last August to the state Clean Water State Revolving Fund to borrow money for sanitary sewer and storm drain improvements. There were 3 parts to the proposal. One was to do relining in the sanitary sewers along the Winbrook watershed, where the state and others had noted through monitoring that we were leaking sanitary waste into the watershed, which is improper and illegal, and this is to reline and stop that leaking into the receiving waters. There's also a notice of noncompliance that have been issued to the town, and this relining will go a long way toward, we hope, resolving that notice of noncompliance, and the state is enthusiastically supporting our doing this to solve that problem. There's a second purpose, and that's to replace 2 pumps in the sanitary sewer system that are up on the hill. And the third is to undertake some projects to mitigate flooding in the Winbrook area. The total amount of funding available to us is approximately $11.6 million. We'll be able to borrow up to that amount, provided that the state approves our designs in August. And that money is at a fixed rate of 2%, which is also well below now the current market rate, which is going higher and higher. 20-year term, 2%.
Right. Is the relining a permanent solution, or is it a stopgap?
Relining is a permanent solution. Essentially, the lining is forced in. It's a PVC-type lining. It coats the inside of the shell of the old drain. It provides a bit more capacity because it's smoother on the inside and therefore has greater hydraulic capacity. In the end, the vitreous clay outer shell will fall away, and what you have left standing is this PVC pipe with an estimated useful life of about 100 years.
Move we recommend approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Bill, may I, procedural issue?
Sure.
Ralph, will you do the town meeting?
Yes.
For each of these articles,
We
I'll
have
follow
to.
up on you.
That's right, you're now the moderator, aren't you?
Trying to get a head start. Get this lined up, smooth as silk.
Why is Mike here?
Yeah, right. And I'm here, I might as well nail it down.
Putting notes on that?
Yeah, I got notes.
All right, we're going to hear about the, we're going to swing back to the beginning of this warrant, but since we're up here in the article high teens, why don't we take up Article 18, the OPEB trust fund enabling legislation. And I have read this, and other than a couple of typos, which I can point out to Jeff offline here, I just had one question, which was related to section on the bottom of page 11, where we delete section 3 of the act and insert in place a requirement that we engage an actuary no less frequently than every second year. And I guess my question is, first of all, what's different about the inserted language from the old language, and then the next question is, and there may be nothing to do about this if the old language says basically the same things. Why do we want to have a law compelling us to do something versus the idea that we just ought to do it as a good thing on our own?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the biennial actuarial study is not being changed. The only two things that are being changed in Section 3 are, one, clarifying that it will be the town and not the retirement board that pays for that study, and B, that the study will be not merely reported to town meeting, but also published in the town's annual report. Those are the only substantive changes in that section.
Anybody else have any comment here? Roy?
Yeah, Phil, I thought you were asking why are we even engaging in such a study?
Well, I did. We're already stuck. The legislature's already passed a law requiring that we engage in a biennial study.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't have to be a big study, though. It can be a small study.
I'm just saying, we've already asked the legislature to pass a law requiring us to do something, and it's a little late to ask why we did that in the first place, but.
Well, actually, GASB 45, which is the reason for all of this, requires a biennial actuarial study.
Oh, good.
Why, okay, that still doesn't necessarily answer the question of why the legislature has to weigh in with an opinion about it.
Yeah,
It's one thing for private organizations to say you need to do it, and another for the government to compel you to do it, but.
Do we have, in terms of the changes, I may have missed something, and I apologize if I did. I thought between last week and this, we were going to get a summary of the changes, and maybe it came.
Red line version.
Red line version.
I actually have that here. I didn't
Okay.
get a chance to email it out,
That's
but I
fine,
have
but
copies
that's-
right now for anyone who would like to look at it.
Well, we should definitely send it out. I'm sorry, Mike, you're right. We did ask for that. Well, we should get it done.
It should clearly be done at town meeting. Should be clearly done.
I mean, you should have a red line copy.
They should have a red line copy as well.
It's a little difficult because I'm trying to deconstruct the work of multiple lawyers, but I did the best I could.
All right, Jeff, why don't you quickly walk us through what is going on there?
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know if, it really is just what is stated in the explanatory paragraph in the warrant booklet itself. A lot of this is just moving language from one part of the bill to another. I don't know why that was done, but it looks like a lot of changes, but it really isn't as much of a change as it looks like. The key provisions are clarifying that it's going to be the retirement board that does the investing, because they have the flexibility to use additional investment vehicles that the treasurer doesn't have. Clarifying that the town's going to pay for the actuarial study, and just little technical changes like, yeah, we're going to print it in the annual report. Barbara, is there anything else that I'm missing here?
No, it just took some of the treasurer language out of there. The treasurer still will be dispersing the money to the retirement board, but it takes the treasurer out as the custodian, because in effect, the treasurer is no longer the custodian, the retirement board. And that was the intent of the law all along, was the retirement board wanted to be the custodian.
Well, it's the new language,
You said they wanted, I'm sorry, did I miss? They
That was the
wanted to-
intent. It was the intent always to have the retirement board do the investing, because they have a much broader investing capacity. They can do lots of different kinds of things that the town cannot do.
I would respectfully suggest that the more limited range available to the treasurer has probably done better in the last 3 months than the retirement board.
Well, that's probably true. But in the 12 months preceding that, it probably wasn't true. Lloyd, do you have an opinion about that?
No.
Well,
Good answer.
Mike?
Jeff, did town council basically drive this, or what led to these changes? I mean, did some
Yes.
town council?
Town council felt that we needed to standardize the language, because this was modeled after what the town of, was it Arlington? That had similar legislation, and they were uncomfortable with the fact that ours said some things that were different than the way theirs said it. They would like to have everything standardized.
Okay.
Liz?
If, at the end of the day, the pension funds were to be managed by the state, would this mean that our local board would continue to manage this other post-employment benefit trust fund all by its lonesome?
I expect so.
That would be a not good outcome.
Well, we talked a little bit about it with our investment manager. And this would probably be in a separate mutual, some kind of a separate mutual fund, which will mirror as much as possible the asset allocation of the present retirement fund. So the only advantage of having it run by the retirement board is that they have the flexibility to do real estate, venture capital, alternative investments, all different kinds of stocks that the town cannot do.
But
only got 600,000.
Yeah, but that's, my concern is because the sum is so large, it is so small, it would really be difficult to do a good job of managing.
That's why we're talking mutual,
$600,000.
that's why we're talking about a mutual fund of some kind, right, exactly.
Ralph and Mike?
I was going to suggest originally that since this was all because town council decided to reword it, we might have town council explain why he wanted it reworded. I mean, that's one thing that would help perhaps, as we didn't necessarily do that.
Well, that's a good point. I guess is there anything compelling us to do anything about this year? Or with this town?
Well, I was going to add one other point, and then we also might want to ask town council if whether or not the language in this binds us to the sort of problem that Liz just identified, and if so, he ought to find some alternative language that gives us more flexibility in the future.
Right, we don't want a pension board left managing $600,000.
Right.
Barbara?
This came about because the retirement board was writing the IRS regulations so that we can be tax exempt. This has to be tax exempt, and we have to go through a process with the IRS to get the tax exempt status. And as we were writing it, that's when they discovered that the language was not in keeping with what needs to go into the IRS document. So that was the whole purpose.
Let's back, just to lend a context to this discussion about whether you want the retirement board involved or not. The current legislation says There shall be in the town of Belmont an OPEB trust fund, which shall be under the supervision and management of the town's contributory retirement board. So, it sounds to me like they're already doing it. I mean, this isn't really a change.
It's more in the nature of a clarification. You're right.
That part seems to me to be pretty clear. Along with all the attendant questions that we raised, it's still in the current legislation. Jim?
I was going to move that we recommend that this article be dismissed and brought up at a later meeting, when have some of these questions are answered.
Yeah, that's maybe a good idea, and that's kind of the question I was just, occurred to me, is do we really need to do anything about this for this town meeting?
Good question.
Barb, you seem to be the most expert on this.
It cannot go into the retirement system until it is settled, because I cannot commingle or have in the retirement board mixing things that could possibly be taxable with non-taxable retirement funds.
Is it,
Stay with
Ralph?
it stays in a special fund.
Correct. Right now, it's in a trust fund with the town. Correct.
That, for a small amount of money, seems a reasonable place to leave it until we can sort these issues out.
Yeah, right.
Second.
So, do you want to make a motion, Jim, again?
I will move that we recommend that this article be dismissed with the understanding that after further legal study, it will be reintroduced to the next available town meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Did you get that, Lisa? 'Cause I'm gonna have to read that one at town meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Do we still have to, if, let's just jump ahead, if we did decide to go into the state pension plan, are we still required to have a retirement board?
I don't know the legality.
Yes. Because there are details about people with.
Yeah, there are other responsibilities, yes, presumably yes, because there are some other responsibilities. So probably.
I can't see the state worried about whether Joe Blow is trying to retirement.
Okay, getting back to salaries of elected officials, Article 5. The context of this was, we were wondering whether the increase of a little over 8% for the town clerk was consistent with our policy concerning pay raises for the town clerk and town treasurer.
Well, after last week's discussion, I addressed a letter to the town clerk stating that it was the Warrant Committee's view that she should only receive a 4% increase, and I added what I computed that to be, and told her that's all the Warrant Committee would recommend. I think you got a copy of the letter, Jim.
Actually, I may have, but.
So the new number,
Did she?
The new number I got was 80,697. You got a copy of the letter, right?
I did, I just don't have it.
Did you get a response?
I have heard nothing. I expect my name to be deleted from the voting list shortly.
I mean, just in case for the listening or viewing audience, to repeat, this is because this follows the practice.
Right.
This is not a decision about the performance of the town clerk or the town treasurer, it's simply practice in terms of our management employees, and we're following the same practice in relationship to the midpoint of the range with the clerk and the treasurer.
Angela?
Is the midpoint of the range for both positions, as best as we know right now, the same?
No, it's not.
No.
Not.
Okay, so the mid-range for the clerk's position is lower than the mid-range for the,
Yeah, we can just look at the last schedule.
Yes. The mid-range for the town, is taken from other towns. The mid-range for clerks, with the sole exception of an odd situation in Lexington, is lower than that for treasurers.
Here's the issue. Supposing somebody was $2 below the mid-range. Okay. Our policy would be then to give that person a 4% increase plus a
Plus the
4%
$2.
increase. So by
Plus
being
the
two.
$2.
Huh?
Plus the
No, no.
$2.
No, it's a 4% increase. What is the policy? Is it a 4% increase period, or is it a 4% increase to, or an increase that brings them to the mid-range plus the 4%? The way I had understood the policy was that it was a 4%, if they're below the mid-range, they get a 4% increase, wherever that takes them. And then they get a 4% increase on top of that. So if somebody is below the mid-range by $2 or $3, they could end up getting an 8% increase.
That's not, I don't have the policy in front of me, Angela, but I'm sure that's not the policy, doesn't make
I don't know
sense.
the answer to that, Angela.
Well,
Was it this
but let me just try as an example. What is the mid-range for the town treasurer's position? Do we know that number?
Yeah, you have that, you had it.
I had it, I'm not sure I have it with me. It's in the high 80s.
The town treasurer probably knows.
Yes, Floyd, please?
Yes.
He's gonna pass out copies for you.
No, I just need to know what the mid-range number is.
He only has the one.
Mr. Chairman, if I can try to address the chairman's question.
But hang on a second, let's just finish with this document that the treasurer has handed out.
Well, I wanted to address the question he asked before that question, which was how are the percentages applied? My understanding is that the first percentage is the equivalent of a general wage increase, and that the determination of whether the employee is above or below the midpoint is looked at after that. So in the example that you just mentioned, that first 4% would take them over the midpoint, and then they wouldn't get the second one because they're already over it.
No,
It's the other way
I don't
around.
think so.
It's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
I'm not sure we, look, Angela, I mean, that's an interesting question, I don't think we have
We
to
don't need
reach
to
it.
worry
Well, it seems to me
It's not-
that the difference we ended up with by doing this decision is pretty dramatic between those two positions. That's why I'm raising the issue.
The difference between the two positions it's just the difference in the two positions. The question is, what are, and to me, the most important question in this conversation is, are we using an accurate and more or less up-to-date range
Well,
of
here
other
is,
town clerks?
Mr. Whitmer was kind enough to hand me a copy of my own memo.
Courtesy of Mr.
I looked into Arlington, Burlington, Watertown, Wellesley, Weston, Winchester, and I got for average fiscal 2008 salaries, treasurer 86,466, clerk 74,371. Is that
74?
74,371?
That was the average, so we're calling that the mid-range?
Yes.